Hi, I'm Karlin Borisenko. In early 2020, I was the knitting Democrat who accidentally went viral on the internet for going to a Trump rally and then left the party. I became the conservative darling, was on all the shows, traveled around the country, and then realized that conservatives were no better than Democrats. If there's one thing that I've learned, it's that both political tribes are two sides of the same coin. But it wasn't all bad. On my journey, I became obsessed with understanding the woke ideology and the culture war. I broke the story of the city of Seattle doing segregated training with its employees.
How bad has this stuff become? The city of Seattle has now put out, I'm not kidding you, this is according to Dr. Karlin Borisenko, who's an organizational psychologist. The city of Seattle asked its white employees to voluntarily spend a day off in a training about their internalized racial superiority.
I broke the story that led to the first ever federal lawsuit against critical race theory in the schools. I broke the Coke Be Less White story, one of the biggest anti-woke stories of all time. It got over 30 million views. Coca-Cola's corporate headquarters even had to change their outgoing voicemail.
Throughout the past few days, you may have seen inaccurate reporting on the content of our recently launched diversity, equity, and inclusion training program.
I exposed the schools in Burlington, Vermont for grooming middle school children live on the internet. They called me an unwoke cult leader for that. And the Vermont Human Rights Commission slandered me publicly as being a hate channel. I even got called a hero in Breitbart for exposing that the Washington Post was writing a hit piece on Christopher Rufo. I have broken story after story after story about what's going on in the public schools, from Cambridge, Massachusetts, to autistic sex education, to the Department of Education in Michigan, literally training teachers all over the state how to groom children. I wrote a book called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. I host a podcast all about fighting back, and I'm downloading all of my knowledge to you on my Substack, karlin.substack.com. The world is a crazy place. We are literally surrounded by cults on all sides. On this show, we're going to do a deep dive into all aspects of the culture war, and I will show you the dark, dystopian underbellies on both sides. Here are the commitments I'll make to you. I will always tell you the truth. I will always bring you receipts. And if you stick with me, I promise you will see the world differently. Welcome to the cult. Please mount that like button for me and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Well, hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to The Cult. The Cult is a show that I stream Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday on this here YouTube channel, on Rumble, on Twitter, on Facebook, on maybe a couple other places as well. Though I have cut back my streaming sites lately because most of the people watching are either watching on Twitter, Rumble, or YouTube. So that's what we're going to do for now. And this is a show where we talk about all aspects of the culture war and all of the cults that we are surrounded by, because I really do believe that we are surrounded by cults. We're surrounded by cults on the left. We're surrounded by the cults on the right. We are surrounded by groups of tribalists that do nothing more but reinforce their own fantasies and delusions. What's the saying? What is the saying? Clowns to my left, jokers to my right. That is basically what we're living in today. And I like to think that I bring a normal, level-headed approach to the situation, where I basically think that everyone is insane. I think that everything should be, like, the government should be abolished, because I don't trust either side to have control of it. And yes, here I am, stuck in the middle with you. Exactly. So if you are a person that is disaffected with all sides, then this is the community for you. But I will say that we do spend a little bit more time focusing on the woke left rather than the woke right. Yes, conservatives are woke too. Yes, they are. That's another topic for another day. We spend more time focusing on the left because, quite frankly, the left are far more dangerous. And today we're going to be taking a little jaunt back in to the wonderful world of libraries. But we are not talking about our favorite Marxist lesbian librarian, Emily Drabinski. Emily Drabinski gets all the play, but make no mistake, guys, other librarians are socialists too. In fact, this guy right here, Matthew is a socialist that likes to cause problems on Twitter. So much so that I recently did a whole post about Matthew on my Actively Unwoke Substack, which is Karlin, Karlyn.substack.com. Now, I had no idea who Matthew was. Never heard of him. Never had an issue with him until Matthew started making trouble for me on Twitter. I'm going to show you what he wrote, and I can show you this because I'm logged into a sock account here that Matthew doesn't know the name of, but I can show you this. Matthew started tweeting about me to send mobs of librarians into my feed. He says, "Today in laughable right-wing takes, I'm not on the right, Matthew. I think the right is just as crazy as the left, but socialists believe that everyone who is not a socialist is on the right. So let's just, let's live in their fantasy land for a second. They seriously think if everyone uses the library will break." Well, that was basically images that I posted from a great comment I got on my YouTube channel of someone who works in a library saying, "Here's all the ways that you can drive librarians crazy." I thought it was funny. I posted it on Twitter. And then Matthew decided to stick his nose into something that didn't involve him and do a whole thread about me. And then I started realizing what was going on because Dan Kleinman, who is the head of the World Library Association, pinged me with Matthew's tweet. He said, "Carlin, you should probably see this." And I said, "Oh, really?" And so I quote tweeted Matthew and I said, the quote tweets will help you identify the enemy. I just retweeted a whole bunch of them. "Hello, librarians, we see you." The comments on this thread were next level socialist lunacy. It was crazy. So then Matthew started making trouble for me. And because I don't like it when socialists start making trouble for me, when I didn't cause any trouble here, I was just minding my own business. I wasn't trying to go after Matthew. Matthew stuck his nose into my business. So I decided to investigate Matthew, and I had, of course, the help of the cult's chief investigative officer, Bot. And Bot and I started looking into Matthew, and we found out that Matthew is a librarian at Harvard that has an active curation of anti-racist resources. We know, of course, anti-racism is code word for anti-capitalism, which is socialism. And we know that Matthew has this Twitter banner that says, "If it's inaccessible to the poor, it's neither radical nor revolutionary." Pro tip, anytime you hear the word radical, when it doesn't come from a surfer or a Ninja Turtle, you are talking to a socialist. They call socialist politics radical politics. So anytime you hear that, now sometimes, every once in a while, you'll hear this with libertarians as well, but let's be honest, there are a lot of libertarians who are socialists. There really are. And most of the time, the people who are using the term radical are indeed socialists. So it's a nice little way to farm that out. But another thing that I found out was Matthew was in this here video called "Libraries, Book Banning, and Graphic Medicine." And I hadn't had a chance to watch this video yet of the socialist librarian that works at Harvard, Matthew. I hadn't had a chance to watch this yet, and so I thought we would watch it on the stream today. It's only an hour long, so it's relatively quick. A conversation with special guest Matthew No, a librarian for Harvard Medical School and a socialist. By the way, Matthew later admitted to being a socialist on Twitter. Just so people know, I'm not just blowing smoke when I say Matthew's a socialist because he published an anti-racist book collection and uses the term radical in his Twitter profile. After I published this article, Matthew did overtly admit that he's a socialist. He admitted it. So this wasn't just conjecture. When you follow the language will always tell you what political group they're part of. And so Matthew was like, "Yeah, I never hid my political affiliation. I'm a socialist." Oh, thank you, Matthew, for that. Good to know that you're working at Harvard Medical School in the library. That's just great. This conversation took place back in May, and it says, "We discuss things like the role of libraries in society, the growing field of graphic medicine, and the rise of book banning." Ding! In 2022. Oh no, this took place in 2022. I'm sorry. This is over a year and a half old. That's still okay. We're going to watch it anyway. We also dive into how citizens can take action if a book is challenged in their communities. What he means by that is do little socialist activism. That's what he means. So we're going to watch this today, and we're going to see what socialist librarian Matthew has to say. We're going to do a little bit of a light day. I want to catch up on some my back catalog that I've been meaning to take care of. But before we get into that, I do just want to remind everyone to please make sure you are subscribed to my Substack. Again, that is Carlin, Karlyn.substack.com. This is my content hub on the internet. This is where I post all my best Unwoke content, from breaking news to exclusive investigations to the Woke 101 series, where I'm breaking down the woke ideology in plain English, to the Woke Mind series, where I'm talking about the psychology of the woke left, to the My Day with the Socialist series, where I'm taking you inside literal socialist conferences. I still have stuff from Socialism 2023 that I haven't posted yet. It's more like just general interest stuff. It's not like breaking news. It's kind of like, here's insight into the minds of the socialists. Like, it's cool stuff. I think it's cool anyway. So don't think I'm done with that yet. Just because I haven't posted in a minute because I had to do some other stuff. Like, don't think that's not coming back. I got a whole bag full of stuff over here I really do want to show you guys. Anyway, you can get access to all that and much more over on my Substack. You can subscribe for free, which will give you access to a lot of content. But if you do want to support the work I'm doing and keep me in business, because I am completely funded by you, 100% grassroots funding. That's the way I like it. Please make sure you sign up for a subscription for $8 a month, $80 a year. The subscriptions go back. They're pretty much, I don't have a life. So the subscriptions are pretty much reinvested into doing this work and hopefully going to more events and conferences. We do want to do one more conference infiltration before the end of the year. We have some ideas about what that event is going to be. We're still researching it a little bit, but you can help us do more event infiltrations, and we want to do a teacher one this time. It's going to be, spoiler alert, it's going to be a teacher one. We want to bring you inside more leftist events to show you what's going on, show you what they're talking about, so you can help fund that work directly by becoming a subscriber on my Substack. You can also do it by becoming a subscriber in my locals community, Patreon, YouTube channel membership, Twitter subscriptions. Whatever works best for you is fine with me. Of course, it all comes to the same place, but I do want to recommend the Substack if you're going to have to choose one, because that I think is just the best option, and that's where I'm really trying to grow my audience right now, and I really do appreciate it. I also want to point out that someone in the chat did ask about the webinar. There is a free webinar coming up tonight at 8 p.m. called How to Speak Socialist. Now, there's still plenty of seats available. There's still about 100 seats available for it. I want to thank everyone. I mean, hundreds of people have signed up for this. I'm actually really surprised, but also delighted that so many people are signing up for the webinar tonight about how to speak socialist. We're going to have a great show. I was just putting the finishing touches on the presentation. Lots of video clips. It's not just going to be me talking the whole time. We're going to watch lots of video clips of socialists actually speaking so that you can see what it looks like when it shows up in the real world. We're going to be covering content such as whiteness means capitalism, how capitalism created the gender binary, what does the nuclear family have to do with capitalism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, so that you can break down, so that you can learn how to see these concepts when they show up in the real world. This is really, really important. This is like your Socialism Saturday quick start guide, because Socialism Saturday can be a bit overwhelming. Anyway, join me at 8 p.m. Eastern. It is completely free to register. There is an option to make a donation if you want to do that, but no pressure if you can't afford it or you're already a subscriber or supporter on another platform. I totally understand. It's just there as an option. But of course, it will support the work I'm doing. And Tayton says, this is a great question. Will I be able to listen to the webinar later if I can't make it tonight? Yes, because how it works is the webinar will be recorded, and about 2 hours after the webinar, or alternatively tomorrow morning, just depending on how late I stay up tonight, what will happen is I will publish the recording after it's processed in the system, and everyone who is signed up for the webinar will get the recording automatically delivered to your email, okay? So if you can't make it live tonight, that's okay. Just sign up anyway, and that will give you the recording delivered to your inbox so that you can watch it on demand whenever you want to watch it. But I appreciate you asking the question. I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a great event. I hope you guys are looking forward to it as well. But first, we got to get through today. What else did I want to say? I also want to let people know, last night I published this article, and this is something that conservatives don't like me talking about, but this is important. And this is directly related to what we're talking about with libraries too. Leftists are using book bans against you to turn your children into activists. Now, I have been against book bans since this crap started 2 years ago, driven by Moms for Liberty. I was against it the minute that it started. And the reason I was against it is not that I'm in favor of porn in schools, which I know conservatives like to say, but that's just not the truth. Like, anytime I talk about how this is a really bad idea, conservatives like, oh, you want kids reading porn? Well, no, that's not what I want. But There are other reasons that this is a bad idea. And one of the reasons that this is a bad idea is that we now know for sure, unequivocally. I'll even play you the audio on this stream right here. We can do a little pre-show. Hang on, let me get the audio set up. We now know for sure, unequivocally, that socialist activists, librarians specifically, but I'm sure this is also going on in schools, are using the book bans to activate your children to turn them into socialist activists. Like, socialists do not mind that you guys are doing the book banning stuff. They love it. I heard about the book bans more at the socialism conference than almost any other topic. You want to know why? Because they are actively planning for how to use the book bans to activate more activism against you. They fucking love that you guys are doing this book banning stuff. Every single time you are focused on book banning, socialists are using it to not only gain more power over you, but also to do activism in different areas that you aren't even paying attention to because you're so focused on book banning. But even more than that, they are using book banning to go to your kids and say, can you believe your adults and your parents are trying to ban these books? Isn't banning books horrible? Do you think banning books is a good idea, little Johnny? And then little Johnny, because he hasn't developed the logic reason function of his brain yet, says, book banning is horrible. I can't believe the evil conservatives would try to ban books. And then they start creating little activist groups of children in the libraries and in the schools to introduce children to the idea of activism. What that means is that every single time that this book banning bullshit is pushed, you are actually gaining power for the left by giving them a really easy way to turn your children into leftist activists, because children are never going to be able to wrap their minds around this, guys. Children have fairness and justice, like they have that programmed into them. It's not fair that I can't read that book. It's not fair that he can't read that book. It's not fair. It's not fair. They're using it to teach your children how to be activists. And I'm going to prove it to you before we get into the main video today. This again is on the Substack. I published this last night, but this clip that we're going to watch is from a spy stream that I did a couple weeks ago, a supporter exclusive spy stream into the Urban Librarians Conference. This is Emily Drabinski, the head of the American Library Association, getting asked a question by a participant in this conference that directly says that librarians are using book bans to organize programming for your children that is going to teach them how to be activists. It's a quick clip. Let's listen.
So we have a question here from Laura. It's a comment and question about book banning, focus on the kids. As a YA librarian, I'd say we should focus on teens and tweens to do interactive, engaging, and fun programming around banned books. I say this because every time I do, they are floored to learn that some books are banned. I know I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, so perhaps that is my privilege, but my point is that the more we talk about the absurdity of book banning to young people, the more allies we gain and future taxpayers to support libraries. What are your thoughts on this? And thanks for all you do.
Yeah, absolutely. My kid goes to a sleepaway camp for a few weeks every summer, and this year the kids do a sort of activist project, and their project was book bans, and they were so exercised by the idea, so outraged by the idea that an adult would say they couldn't read a book. I mean, it's just absolutely, your kid is just like mind-blowingly outrageous and unacceptable, right? So I do think those youth voices are really important. I was in Dallas.
So Emily goes on for a little bit and says some more stuff that's not relevant, but I wanted to play you guys that clip because this is proof, guys. This is proof. This is not just onesies and twosies. It's just that this is how we happen to come across it. Librarians are creating programming for your teens and tweens about how to fight back against the book bans perpetrated by the evil conservatives and using that to introduce them to leftist activism. And then Emily replied, my kid went to sleepaway camp where they also taught them how to be activists using book bans as an example. So I know, guys, I really do. I understand. I get it that you guys don't want porn in schools. You don't want porn in libraries. I really, really get it. I do. It's not an unreasonable request. It's really not. But what I want you to see is that your focus on the goddamn books, which, by the way, isn't actually going to result in what you think it will anyway, because as I've previously covered on this channel, 19 Ways from Sunday, Socialists have dozens of book publishers that are churning out books all the time. So if you get genderqueer out of the library, you're giving yourself a big pat on the back. Guess what? They're going to replace that with like 5 more books that you don't even know about. And it's going to keep you in a constant state of chasing your tail, just chasing after these newest books, when the supply of books will never end. They are using it as a diversionary tactic to keep you focused on something that you can never, ever, ever, ever beat them at. And so while I understand and don't think it's an unreasonable request that children should not be exposed to porn in schools, I really want everyone to see that every single time, every single ounce of energy that you are putting into this unwinnable battle, which is the book banning nonsense, you are actually giving the left all the ammo they need to turn your children into activists and to gain more power over you. Every single time you get a win with the book bans, it's not really a win at all, because when you've been doing that, the left already advanced 3 steps ahead of you every single time. You are literally digging your own graves with this. I don't know how else to put it. I really don't. Sometimes you have to make the smart strategic decision. Sometimes you have to kill your darlings. Killing your darlings is a concept in writing where you write something that you think is genius and perfect and the most amazing thing you've ever written, and then you look at it back in the context of the overall book, and it just doesn't make sense. And it might be great, and it might be awesome, and it might be the best thing you've ever written, but in the overall context of what you're dealing with, it doesn't make sense. So you have to kill your darlings. If conservatives are ever going to have any shot of beating back this ideology, they need to kill their book banning darling. They need to stop, because every single time, and I don't want to hear any fucking excuses, every single time you guys think you get a win on the book front, you're actually losing. You're digging the hole deeper, and you don't even realize that you're digging the hole deeper, because the socialists, the far left, the activists, the librarians, the teachers, they are celebrating. They're using it. They know it. It is strategic. So if you guys don't want to listen to this and you want to keep focusing on the book banning bullshit to suck the dick of Moms for Liberty, go right ahead. But don't say that no one ever warned you that it was going to be a bad idea. Moms for Liberty has done more damage to the anti-woke movement than any leftist organization could ever dare dream. Moms for Liberty is the astroturfed Pied Piper that is leading the conservative right off a cliff. And no one even realizes it, because they aren't paying attention to what the left is actually doing. And Tim Pool is a moron if he believes the right is winning the culture war, because it just means he's not listening. Anyway, that I wanted to make sure you guys were aware of. If you want to listen to that clip, share it around. It is available exclusively on my Substack, because this was part of unique journalism and reporting that I did that doesn't exist anywhere else. It is on my Substack today at carlin.substack.com. And if you want to support the work I'm doing with a subscription for $8 a month or $80 a year, I would really appreciate it, because you guys are the ones that give me the ability to go inside the events, like the Urban Librarians Conference, which did cost me money to sign up for. And we would not get this information without it. All right, guys, now that we've got that out of the way, please go ahead and mount that like button for me. There is a shocking disparity between the number of people watching right now and the number of people who have mounted that like button for me. Let's get into our presentation for today. We are listening to the Harvard Socialist librarian Matthew talk about libraries, book banning, and graphic medicine.
Libraries have to face all kinds of ethical questions, like thinking about privacy and access to information, and the very idea that information should be freely available is kind of a radical thought.
Radical
and
socialist.
Grounded in a certain kind of moral view of the world.
All right, guys, the volume is a little bit quiet on the video. So what I'm going to do, everyone needs to work together. I'm going to turn down my microphone, and we're all going to turn up our own personal volume, okay? So everyone turn up their volume on their computer. I'm turning up my volume. I'm turning up my volume. I think I can hear myself. There we go. And now we can hopefully actually hear what Matthew is saying.
Howdy, and welcome to One for the Books, a show about all things bookish. I'm your host, Sandra Broadwell. For this very first episode, my guest is Matthew No. Matthew is the lead collection and knowledge management librarian at Countway Library for Harvard Medical School and a part-time instructor at the University of Kentucky in the School of Information
Oh, good.
Science.
He's a
He is
professor.
most well known
Socialist
for work in
professor.
comics, librarianship,
Oh, good.
health humanities, and in particular, graphic medicine. Matthew is the current president of the American Library Association's Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable and a founding board member and treasurer for the Graphic Medicine.
You know, that's funny because I told people that Emily Drabinski had a little entourage within the American Library Association from the Socialism Conference. And oh, look, Matthew is involved with the American Library Association. How funny.
International Collective. He also serves
Collective,
as treasurer
socialist
on the Worcester
word.
Public Library's board of directors. So Matthew, first off, thank you so much for agreeing to be the very first guest on the inaugural episode of a brand new show. That was very brave of you, and I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks. So you and I attended the University of Kentucky for some overlapping time, and I was trying to remember, I actually looked up our friendship on Facebook, and it says we've been friends since October of 2011.
Okay.
Which is a long time. But I think we might have actually met because of Green Thumb. Does that sound right? Were you in Green Thumb?
Green Thumb or the I don't even remember what it was called anymore. There was some like president student group that had money that worked with Shane Tedder on things.
Was it Earth Days in the Bluegrass? Does that sound right?
There was that too. I still have a few of those t-shirts.
Yeah. So we were involved in environmental things on campus, I think is how we met. So that was a long time ago.
Yeah. Round one at UK.
Yeah, same for me. So your bio is very impressive, obviously. I just read through it, but so let's start with some basics. What is graphic medicine?
Sure. So the formal academic-y kind of definition of it is that graphic medicine is the intersection of the medium of comics and the discourse of healthcare. Basically, though, we're just talking about comics, comic books, graphic novels, comic strips, all of them. Anything that falls under comics that discusses an aspect of health or illness, right? So it could be a memoir about a medical procedure or a memoir about an illness that someone's going through. It could be...
You know what doctors I don't trust? The doctors that need a graphic novel to explain like medical things to them, or like people who need I mean, it just like that seems a little bit weird to me.
The less than ideal therapy sessions that show up in superhero comics, manga. There's all kinds of ways that it shows up.
That makes sense. I feel like the University of Kentucky has some like stop smoking tobacco products, like comics and stuff that they share all the time. I don't know why I always see those, but what is it that got you into comics?
So I mean, I didn't really read comics a bunch growing up. I think the first comics I ever read were less than legally obtained manga on the internet. Because I mean, that's probably how most teenagers my age found manga in the first place. Mm-hmm. But really, I started reading comics when she's my wife now, but when we first started dating, she introduced me to the local comic shops in Lexington. It was I don't even remember the name of it anymore, but it's not the same name anymore. But so I started reading comics then, and then shortly after that, I started grad school for library science, and was thinking about medical librarianship and consumer health and all of this, and it just kind of made sense that comics could be a useful tool for learning about healthcare topics, because the visuals help and people are much more likely to read them. I wasn't thinking that clearly about it then, but now I'm like, there are studies that show people are more likely to finish reading a comic.
Yes, I definitely want a doctor that requires a comic in order to understand medicine.
comic than they are just a pamphlet that's text only.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she got me reading comics, and then I've never stopped and dove right in hardcore with it ever since.
That's awesome. So why were you think like you went into librarianship with
Yeah.
but with healthcare in mind? Is that what you're saying? Like you had like a healthcare emphasis from the get-go?
I mean, sort of. So, my undergrad degree is in philosophy.
Okay.
Not the most employable
Marxism. It's in Marxism, is what it is.
Shocking, right? But so when I basically had like a quarter life crisis and decided to go to grad school in response. And librarianship made a lot of sense. I knew some other philosophy undergrads who were doing library science. One of them was working at the University of Kentucky's Medical School Library.
Wait. What did that comic say? Hang on.
Some other philosophy undergrads who were doing library science.
Hang on.
One of them was working at
critical librarianship. Oh, got ya. Critical librarianship is a reference to critical theory, which is a reference to Marxism.
The University of Kentucky's Medical School Library.
Okay.
And so that was kind of my end there. Like they told me what they were doing, and they were graduating when I was just starting. So there was an internship opportunity there. So I just kind of slid right into medical libraries by working as a reference intern at that library, and just kind of ran with it. I don't think I intended to be a health sciences librarian so much. I started working there. There was a specialization opportunity for health sciences at UK, because the School of Information Science, where the library science program is part of the College of Communications, and UK has a lot of health communications stuff. So there's some overlap there, and it just kind of worked that way. But I mean, I enjoy it. It was all kind of like happy accidents. I didn't like sit down and plan my whole career or life out. It all just kind of worked out this way.
Right. That's really cool. So you, I mean, now it sounds like you're maybe one of like the national experts in this like graphic medicine field. Is that so? That's super cool.
You can watch me get awkward at being called an expert in things, but kind of, yeah. Like, so graphic medicine existed before I came to it, right? So the website's been around since like 2007, when Ian Williams, who's a physician and a cartoonist in the United Kingdom, he coined that term as part of his master's thesis for medical humanities. And so he and MK Serwick and some others were like, they started having these conferences and grew this field. And I found it right at this time when the field was starting to, it had reached that point where it was either going to fizzle out or it was going to boom. And there wasn't really a lot of library people involved in it yet. There were a few, but I kind of ran with it. And then after I graduated, was lucky enough to find a job with a supportive library director who like funded my interest in it and gave me opportunities to run with it. So now, yeah, it's been 8 years since I found graphic medicine and have been building on it ever since.
That's awesome. So speaking of conferences, you said there is a graphic medicine conference coming up soon. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So in theory, yeah, we have an annual conference called the Graphic Medicine Conference because we're very clever. Usually it is every year.
We're not doing bingo right now, Starbright. It's a little short presentation for bingo.
We canceled it all together in 2020. And then in 2021, we held it completely virtually for the first time ever. And we changed the format and everything. It was pretty cool. But the community is fairly small and tight-knit, and the conferences don't feel... If you've ever been to an academic conference, they can tend to be kind of stuffy and rigorous and all of this. But the Graphic Medicine Conference combines that with a comics conference and a lot of people who hang out together outside of work too. And so it's this
Well,
really nice community event.
So this is an interesting question. Not the expert says, my nephew is a socialist. He has always been interested in graphic novels. Is there a connection? Now, I don't think we can ethically say that everyone who is interested in graphic novels is a socialist. But does anyone think it's a coincidence that gender ideology, that most kids are introduced to gender ideology and the whole trans and non-binary thing through anime? That's, I mean, one of the key things, if you don't want your kids to get sucked into gender ideology, you keep them as far away from anime as you possibly can. Because if they're looking at anime on the internet or Tumblr or any of these things, they're probably going to get sucked into it. This has been like an entry point for so many people, for so many people's kids. It's not even funny. Like, so it's kind of like, it's like with Freud, right? Not everyone who likes Freud is a socialist, but a lot of socialists really like Freud. Maybe not everyone who likes graphic novels is a socialist. I don't think we can ethically say that. But is there a connection? Is it like a thing that they're using? Maybe. Let's pay attention and see if we can come up with some more evidence on that.
So we're excited to be back in person, really, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
But so it's coming up in July. July 14th through 16th, we'll be at the University of Chicago.
Anime is 100% absolutely a gateway to gender ideology. It's, bro, this is like not even debatable. Anime is a gateway to gender ideology. Gender ideology comes from socialism. Again, not everyone that watches anime is a socialist, but there have been a lot, and I mean a lot, of kids, school-age kids, that have been sucked into gender ideology through anime.
Medical campus. And it's the first time we've all been able to get together since 2019, really. And, yeah, so it's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to it. So if you're interested and in the area, I mean, our registration is relatively low. We are doing a remote option, so some of the conference will be virtual or hybrid. It's not all virtual. That way we can, because we call ourselves an international collective because we've got people across the globe and not everyone can travel. So we try to make things a little more open.
Right. So if people are interested in attending, where do they find the info?
Yeah, so if you go to graphicmedicine.org, that's kind of the home for all things graphic medicine, but right on the front page, one of our pinned posts right now is the conference information.
So you said you decided to go back to grad school because of a quarter life crisis. What made you decide like librarianship specifically?
I mean, so it's the answer that librarians tend to get testy about, to be honest. But because libraries are much more than just books, right? You kind of have to like people to work in a library, work in a library effectively, because it's really about working with people. But I mean, I'm a voracious reader, and I have been my whole life. So I was that kid who was like parroting back books to their mom when they were 2. I wasn't. She likes to say I was reading to her, but I'm pretty sure, based on my understanding of how young minds work, I had just memorized the stories. But like that's never really gone away. Like I'm surrounded by books here. These bookshelves line this entire room. But so I'm
not surprising.
But so I'm kind of I'm a book nerd, and so that combined with thinking about like what I enjoyed about past jobs. So I was a resident advisor for 4 of my 5 years of undergrad. And so I really enjoyed, actually helping people.
Nope, this is not true. You guys have got to stop saying this. I'm going to correct every single person who ever comes into my chat and says this. These people are mentally unwell. Instead of working on themselves, they want to impose it on us. They are not mentally unwell. Every single time you guys say they're just mentally ill, that's all it is, they're mentally ill, you are dismissing them, which gives them more ability to gain power over you and to win. Okay? So can you please stop doing this? Because every single time you do it, you're giving them an advantage. These people are not mentally unwell. These people have different values. They have different values. They have a different way that they see the world. Just because someone thinks differently than you does not mean they are mentally unwell. And by the way, these people are kicking your ass. They are kicking your ass up and down the playing field. They're barely even trying. They are so far ahead of you that it's not even funny. So what does it say about you if you're getting your ass kicked by mentally unwell people? They are not mentally ill. That is a lie. And if you don't stop saying that in my chat, you might not be here very long, because I don't allow this bullshit in my chat. I do not allow it. This is a learning channel. This is not a place where you get to come in and shitpost. These people are not mentally unwell, and you are giving them an advantage every time you say they are. All right. So Swirly is getting a little timeout, and Swirly on his timeout can think about how he is being completely unproductive. I have, and there's only a slight statistical significance over the left. So it's actually not, or it's over the right. So it's actually not that significant. And again, I have to ask conservatives, for all you guys who just run around going, they're mentally ill, libtards are mentally ill, they're mentally ill, they're just mentally ill. That's all it is. They're mentally ill. You guys are getting your asses kicked by a bunch of mentally ill people then. So what does that say about you? What does that say about you? That you are so ineffective that you're getting your ass is kicked up and down the playing field by just a whole bunch of people who are mentally ill. If you don't want to, nope, they're not nope. I'm telling you guys. Okay, Fibs is going in a timeout. You guys think I'm fucking around? You want to test boundaries like a bunch of children? Every time you dismiss them, you are allowing them to win. The goal is to understand what they are doing so they stop kicking your ass up and down the playing field. If you don't want to do that, you can go and watch a channel where content is made for stupid people. I've said it a million times. You need to have at least an IQ of 100 to be able to comprehend what we're doing on my channel. I'm not just saying that. Like, it's actually true. This content doesn't work for stupid people. So if you're just a person that cannot comprehend the idea that different people have different values, then what I need you to do is unsubscribe from this channel, go over to the Daily Wire. The Daily Wire will make stupid content for stupid people all day long. You will be perfectly happy. The Daily Wire will never tell you anything you don't want to hear. The Daily Wire will never question you. They low IQ people can go over there. No harm, no foul. My content's not for everyone, but as long as you're here, you're gonna fucking learn. And if you're gonna be disruptive, you're not gonna be here for very long.
We'll figure out what was going on in their life, and you know, the philosophy degree is helpful too, because libraries have to face all kinds of ethical questions, like thinking about privacy and access to information. And this, the very idea that information should be freely available is kind of a radical thought, and it's grounded in a certain kind of moral view of the world. And so all of that just kind of melded together to make it seem like a good route. Plus, I knew that there were employment options in libraries.
That's always good, especially after coming off a degree like philosophy.
Yeah. Granted, the degree costs more. Like, librarianship is one of those professions like teaching, where it costs more to get the grad degree than you're going to make in your like, it's a balancing act. But
yeah, for sure.
Hang on, I got a super chat from Rottweiler. Thank you. Let's assume they're mentally ill. What does that accomplish? Nothing, because even if they are, what's your solution? Mandatory therapy, get a grip. That's exactly right. Listen, man, it is true that there is a slight, and I mean slight, differential between people on the political left and people on the political right in terms of mental illness. But I'll tell you this, I think if those studies were rerun today, we're going to start seeing that gap like close, because I see a lot of like real legitimate mental illness, delusion, paranoia, anxiety disorder, depression. Like there's a whole mess of mental illness going on the right now. And it's absurd. And so for them to be the ones projecting like, oh, everyone's mentally ill, everyone is mentally ill. This is something that conservatives do. They quite literally believe that everyone who is not a conservative is mentally ill. everyone who does not speak their talking points is mentally ill. This is another failure of conservative influencers to properly educate their audience about what is going on, giving them the easy, because it feels good, right? Everyone's mentally ill but you. But does that actually make sense to anyone? Really? These people have managed to take over every single institution in our society while they're all mentally ill. So again, what does that say about conservatives? If everyone is mentally ill except for you, and the people who are mentally ill have managed to take over literally every single institution in society, the people who are mentally ill own the entire government, they own the entire media, they own the entire entertainment industry, they own corporate America, they own big tech. The people who are mentally ill are the ones censoring you all the time, and you just can't say anything on the internet because you're being censored all the time. Well, guess what? It's the people that are mentally ill that did that. The mentally ill people took over higher education, the mentally ill people took over K through 12 education, and you're the only sane ones. Everyone, like, does that make sense to anyone else? Like, just on a basic level? Doesn't make sense to me, but if you want to keep deluding yourself, it's a great strategy. Tayton says, if you are going to claim someone has a mental illness, you better be able to specifically say what it is. Oh, here's what they'll say. They're all narcissists. They all have narcissistic personality disorder. They're all narcissists. They're narcissists. Don't you know they're narcissists? They're not. But it's a way to dismiss them. It's a way of deflecting from what the actual problem is to a point where they don't actually have to deal with it. That's really what it is. Anyway, let's continue.
So what does, like, Harvard Medical Library involve? I guess, how is a medical library different from, like, a public library?
So many ways, right?
Yeah.
Well, and it also depends on where the medical library is situated. So Countway Library is an academic research medical library. So we are attached to Harvard Medical School, which is a private research institution. So we're not open to the public in the way, like when I worked at University of Kentucky, everyone could come into that library. And theoretically, as a land-grant institution, every single person who lives in the state of Kentucky had a right to access the information there. Whereas at Harvard, if you're not affiliated, there is no, like, we can sneak people in sometimes, right? But you have to be an affiliated, part of the university to make use of the space and the resources.
Right.
Whereas a public library is open to everyone in the community. And we generally specialize in, like, research materials. So most of our collection buying goes to academic journals or databases rather than physical books. Especially, like, finding comics in an academic medical library is still a very strange idea to a lot of people. But so, I collect those.
Oh, he's
but
got
most of our
lesson
books
plans.
are very
Lesson
textbooky
plans.
or research oriented and less leisure reading, I guess is the way you might put it.
I love the idea of, like, sneaking people into the Harvard Medical Library. Like, whoa, that's some real rebel stuff right there.
It's not super sneaky, like it's like I'm allowed to bring guests in, right? But I'm responsible for whatever they may do. So I'm not going to bring you in if you're going to, like, try to steal things or something.
Right, that makes sense. Okay, and you are the lead collection and knowledge management librarian. What does that mean? What does, like, a day in your work life look like?
Yeah, so you might have guessed based on the way I described the library. That my job is essentially dedicated to selecting and purchasing the materials that the library makes available. Like those journals, I mostly am responsible for our monographs, which are, the textbooks, the one. Sometimes they're part of a series; it gets confusing, but generally the one-off titles are what I focus on. But I also do things like purchase. And I run events and programming and purchase non-traditional things too. Like, we have a short story dispenser, which is basically this like it's like 3 feet tall, but then you add the plexiglass thing and it's like 4 feet tall.
I mean, it may just sound like we're just listening to like a socialist librarian right now. And for those of you who just joined us, he really is a socialist. He's a self-professed socialist that is a librarian at Harvard Medical School, which is why we're listening to this. But I really just want you guys to think about the power that librarians have in your communities. The librarians in the schools, they're the ones that decide what books go into the schools. They're the ones that decide what books get put on the main display. They're the ones that decide what books get featured. They're the ones that decide what programming goes on in the library. They're the ones that decide what book clubs go on in the library. They're the ones that decide what materials they're not going to bring into the library. They're the ones that can cause trouble when you rent library space if you're not of their political affiliation. This seems like a simple thing, but this is a position with a lot of power. Like if your library is a place that people go in your community, chances are you're being influenced by a leftist librarian in ways that you don't even understand.
But it's just this upright machine that you push a button and it prints out on like recyclable receipt paper with no ink or anything. It's like laser printed. A short story that is either 1 minute, 3 minutes, or 5 minutes in reading length. And so you can, so you can just take a quick break and read a story or a poem. Sometimes there's nonfiction, but it's usually fiction.
I love that idea. That is so fun. I'm just like,
yeah, and so
I don't know. I feel like it's like the like blind date with a book that I've seen some libraries do, where they like hide the covers behind.
And by the way, that style of graphic novel that this guy's talking about, using graphic novels in library stuff, I've seen that style of graphic novel all over socialist materials. It's the same thing. It's like it's a very specific style of like illustration that just shows up in socialism materials a lot. I don't understand why they're attracted to that specific type of thing. But if you look at socialist zines, socialist flyers, socialist magazines, anything in which socialists are doing illustration, it looks exactly like what that guy is showing in terms of like the graphic novels, which is interesting.
Like normal looking paper, so you don't know what you're picking up until you get there. That's really
there's
fun.
no way to know what's coming out of it. I mean, we do themes sometimes, like right now you can get Earth Day kind of stories out of it, but you don't know which one's going to come out still. And right now we just bought a portable version of it. Like, this thing is not movable. It sits in one place in the building, but there's a cube that's kind of like the size of a small TV now, or those old like 17-inch TV VCR combo TV.
Yes, this is exactly right. It's their version of memes. That's actually that is a really good observation. That is the socialist version of a meme.
TV's just about that size, but so we can bring it around campus and distribute stories at events and things. And the real goal there is to bring stories to people, but also we do contests with it where we ask the community to write their own stories and submit them, and then they can go in the machine, and if the publisher really likes them, they can get awarded like contracts and things to have their work distributed elsewhere. So I do this kind of programming around getting more humanities stuff into the medical school.
That's really cool to hear that. Yeah, it's not just like stuffy academic medical text. That's very important, obviously, but
you kind of want people to have that, right?
Yeah.
So most of my day is spent like I'm a relatively behind the scenes kind of librarian. Like I mentioned, you need to like people. I have to actively choose to engage with people in my role. Whereas other people in the library, their whole job revolves around like answering reference questions and helping people do like systematic reviews and that kind of research.
And you also serve on the board for the Worcester Public Library. So what role does a board play in a public library? And is that how all public libraries
Worcester. Worcester's
so
working class community.
The library here is actually in a really kind of great position. Like the Worcester Public Library was originally founded by a donation from like a wealthy doctor in town, donated money and books to start the collection and worked with the city to purchase the building, and set the bylaws up in such a way that There's a 9-person board. I think it's 9 people. Don't quote me on it being 9 people. So basically, the board is appointed by Worcester's City Council, and it's set up in such a way that every year 2 people rotate off and 2 new people come on. We have 7-year terms generally. And so the board is responsible for hiring the director of the library and overseeing the director, and for setting policy and managing the budget. But on the ground, day-to-day decisions and the typical operating of the library, the board stays out of that. That's the director's responsibility and the staff's responsibility. But that's the way that it's set up here in Worcester. That is not necessarily the case everywhere, and it varies a lot by state, by county, by city. Like in some library boards so we have directors, other library boards have trustees. Kind of the same thing, but slightly different legal terms and agreements, right? And in some places, the library board is actually an elected on the ballot position, whereas here they're appointed by the city council, who are the elected people of the city.
Right.
And so from a librarianship and from a library worker perspective, really the board should be there to ensure the long-term success of the library, and to set policy that makes sense for the community and the people working in the building, and to really get behind what the librarians are saying they need to and want to be doing, rather than being up on high and dictating down, and or being an impediment to the work that needs to be done, which is unfortunately what happens a lot of the time across the country. Because I'm not going to go on a long rant here for you, but
yeah. I feel like that's the nature of any kind of nonprofit or public entity, probably, that has a board model. It's like when they do well, they're not noticed very much, I feel like.
Well, I mean, some of it is an element of, I just saw a report about public transit boards. The demographics of public transit boards tend to.
So this is a really important point, and this is the difference between how the right looks to gain power and how the left looks to gain power. The right thinks that power comes from political power. They win an election, they control the House, they control the Senate, they control the presidency, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That is a short-term type of power that is very easy to lose, and you will lose it at some point. When people talk about the pendulum swinging, that is only in reference to political power, okay? What the left does is institutional power. Institutional power is getting themselves put into positions that are very difficult for them to get fired or removed from. Board of directors of the library is one of those positions. Administrators within governmental organizations that can't be fired, unelected bureaucrats, exactly, Tom. That is a form of institutional power. Professors who have tenure at colleges and universities that can never be fired. That is a form of institutional power. So anyone who's talking about the pendulum swinging back to the right, maybe it is. It will eventually. But when they're talking about the pendulum swinging, they're only talking about political power, which is a short-term, very easy to lose type of power. They are not talking about institutional power. The pendulum can swing back to the right, and that will still not affect the left's control over institutional power. Okay? So does everyone understand the difference? So when he's talking about being on the board of directors of a library, that is institutional power. Unless he's elected to that position, it is going to be very difficult to remove him, unless he is caught up in some sort of scandal or he does something crazy. But chances are he is going to be on that board of directors for as long as he wants to be on that board of directors. And it's the same thing with every type of institutional power the left gets themselves in a position of. It is very hard to get them out of those positions, and that's why the pendulum swing doesn't really matter. Doesn't matter. It is going to be a short-term victory at best. And while people are celebrating the fact that, oh, we won, the pendulum swung, well, you didn't really, though, because the left still controls all the major institutions, and you are not grappling with that problem.
To be older, white, and male, and they by and large do not use the public transit system that they are in charge of.
Yeah. Hang on. This is a great quote. This is a great quote from Urist. There's a saying I've heard in the past: any institution that is not set up specifically as a right-wing institution will become left-wing in time. That's not an accident. There's a reason for that. Because leftists proactively seek institutional power, where conservatives proactively seek political power. It's because the left is focused on the institutions. That's a feature, that's not a bug. If conservatives had been more focused on the institutions than they were on politics, this would be a whole different game. But the reason that institutions inevitably become left-wing is because the left proactively seeks positions of power within the institutions. The right does not. The right could change that at any time, by the way. This is not an unchangeable thing. If the right started proactively going after these positions of institutional power and did a long march through the institutions just like the left did, they could conceivably change this. The problem is the left's been doing this for over 100 years. So the left has a massive head start. But could the right start to be smarter about what they're doing? They could.
Yep.
You can substitute public library boards for public transit, and it's largely the same, except they tend to skew a little more female than male on library boards. But you know, ideally, your board members are people using the library and standing up for you. But library boards are probably in the news a lot more now than they usually are.
Yep, that's exactly right. Instead of doing anything to take back the institutions, the right just mocks the people running the institutions. Well, while the right is memeing on Twitter and be like, "Yeah, Dr. Jill Biden, Dr. Jill Biden, Dr. Jill Biden," guess what? The left is just gaining more and more and more power. I remember conservatives laughing at gender studies majors and being baristas, but now they're teachers, they're therapists, they're social workers, they're HR managers. It's all fun and games until the far leftist ideologues that you've been mocking for years and dismissing as mentally ill gain power to influence your children.
Yeah, so speaking of that, let's dive into a hot button issue, which I'm sure as a librarian you have strong feelings about, but banning books. So to start, I guess, what's been your reaction to book challenges being at the forefront of public discourse in 2022?
Maybe that's my reaction is flustered, frustrated. What's another F word? Flabbergasted. I want to reach for good place curse words right now, but I won't do that. We want to keep it PG, right? I don't know. It's draining on the first and foremost thing that's always on my mind is how draining it is on the staff dealing with this. I mentioned before, like talking a little bit about the cost of entering this profession versus what you make.
I just want to say hi to everyone watching over on Rumble. I apologize I wasn't paying attention to the Rumble chat. Please make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you're on Rumble. This is actually my proper channel, not the weird secondary channel that Rumble's had me streaming to for a while. So please just double check, make sure you're subscribed. Thank you. Let me see. Sorry, I just bit down on a cough drop, and so I've got if you hear clinging in my mouth, that's what it is. Is it possible to question the curriculum sources rather than the books themselves? Yes! Hang on. I'm going to swallow my cough drop real quick in a way that makes the cough drop ineffective, but whatever. Zebra over on Rumble asks, is it possible to question the curriculum sources rather than the books themselves, like they are using a curriculum for their lessons? Zebra, that is a great goddamn plan. That is exactly what you should be doing. That is exactly and precisely what you should be doing. Don't focus on the books. Focus on the curriculum. Focus on the policies. Focus on the actual like resources they're using to create the curriculum, which by the way, a lot of times they're just downloading off the internet. It's not necessarily coming from the books like you guys think it is. It's like stuff they're downloading off the internet. That's exactly what you should be focused on. I think that's a great idea.
Make as a worker in the profession, right? And so you've got people who are largely already going above and beyond what they would have been asked to do a decade ago, because libraries are one of those fields where we keep taking on new responsibilities while not also getting new staff. In fact, we're usually losing staff while not losing any responsibilities. But so now there's this added pressure and fear really about having these challenges come up. Because in some states are trying to or are enacting these laws where you can be like criminally liable if a book is determined by whoever is determining it to be inappropriate for the library. Right. And that's just ridiculous, right? So, and libraries have collection development policies that clearly outline what we purchase and why. And then we typically also have challenge policies that are supposed to outline the formal process for lodging a complaint against a book. And that usually is you report it. And challenges have always existed, right? That's why we've got these policies. And often they can be handled at a local level. And they often stem from someone misunderstanding a book, or people often haven't read the book that they're challenging. They just see the cover or an image or a quote out of context and take it the wrong way.
This is a big problem with how Moms for Liberty is doing this library book banning stuff, because so basically what happened is Moms for Liberty created a bunch of scripts and handed them out to mothers in their groups to say, call the library and say this. So what's happening at the libraries is the librarians are getting a bunch of calls from a bunch of mothers who are all saying exactly the same thing because they're literally reading off a script, and the librarians know because they question them. Like, have you actually read the book you're talking about? No. In fact, the moms that are calling them are bragging to the librarians that they have not read the books they're talking about. And I know that because I've now listened to enough of this library stuff where I've heard them say this over and over and over again. And that's absolutely something that people in Moms for Liberty would do. Is like, I wouldn't read that. Why would I? Like, you can absolutely hear a conservative saying that. So like, be aware of this. This makes you completely ineffective when you're calling your local town library and you're reading off a script and the librarian goes, have you read the book that you're talking about? And you go, why would I read that garbage? It's trash, or something like that. You are undercutting yourself completely because it's not a serious argument. If you are asking for something to be banned, guys, which again is a horrible idea for all of the reasons that I outlined at the beginning of this broadcast. But if you're going to go down the horrible idea that will inevitably lead to you losing, can you just please read the thing you're trying to ban? Like, is that too high of a bar for you to be reading the thing that you're trying to ban? I just don't think it is. And Chad, I tend to agree with you. I don't think all these like virtue signaling videos of people going in and reading pornography at the school board meeting, I don't think that's actually going to amount to anything either. It is literally just to get a video to put on the internet saying, look what a good conservative I am. I went to the school board and they shut me down. Well, you probably don't even have kids in that district. Like, it's good for show. It's good for a video that you can put on Twitter. But is it actually going to accomplish anything? Probably not.
And it can usually be resolved, or it used to be easily resolved. now it has become wrapped up in the larger, like, regressive political agenda to combat so-called critical race theory, which is not really being taught in your public school.
Yes, it is. Liar, liar,
and,
pants on
and
fire.
targeting stories from Black authors or queer authors, and specifically claiming that these stories are not appropriate for the audience, which makes me, like, viscerally angry, because that's basically saying that people, like, because there are students who have these experiences. So when you're saying that those books aren't appropriate, you're telling those students, those kids, that their lives are inappropriate for the people around them, right? Like, so how is that? Sorry, every time this comes up, I gotta get on it.
No, yeah, no, that's exactly how I think about it too. And I remember reading books that were probably beyond my comprehension level as a kid, and I remember reading like, I read Roots by Alex Haley when I was like in 6th grade, which was pretty advanced, I think. And I remember taking it to my mom and being like, what does this mean? And she looked at it and she was like, are you sure you want to keep reading this? Like, this seems like, she didn't say inappropriate. And, like, you know, I love my mom to pieces, and, you know, thank the Lord that is who raised me to, like, be a good reader and stuff. But she, you know, she didn't, like, freak out and take the book away from me and say, like, don't read things like this. You know, she was just, like, trying to help me understand and, like, making sure I felt comfortable with what I was reading. But, you know, it was so it just, like, it breaks my heart to think that, like, kids are out there whose parents are, like, literally trying to, like, rip books out of their hands in some cases. Like, don't read that, it's horrible. You know, it's like, well, kids are people, you know, and people can decide for themselves what is.
That's a socialist argument. That is a socialist argument. She just made a socialist argument. That's because socialists believe that children are but little people who can make all their own decisions. They're a bit like Scientologists in this regard. Children are just grown adults in little bodies, and they can just do, like, children are people too. Children can make their own decisions. Children deserve privacy from their parents. Like, and I'm not actually like I'm one of those kids. I was reading at, I don't even know. I was reading high school books when I was in elementary school. Like, I've always been a reader. I've always read books that were way more advanced than my age. And so I get it. I really do. And I'm not in favor of the book banning stuff, but this is one of the ways that subtle, like, socialism kicks in, where she's basically saying children don't have, like, children. The ultimate argument this is going to make is that children are not the private property of their parents. Children have to be liberated from their parents. This is how they attack parental rights. And they start by saying, well, children are people too. They can make their own decisions. Okay, well, fair enough. In some respects they can, but then they keep going and they keep going and they keep going. This is like the gateway to parental rights.
I mean, so it gets a little messy, because school librarians are technically licensed educators, and there's a different set of responsibilities there, right? But in a public library setting, easily, right, the librarian is not there to act as a parent for any kid using the space. But what you were describing is what we kind of hope parents are going to do, like, is parent their kids and talk to them and be aware of what their kid is reading, and to have those conversations with them.
Right.
I mean, that's a fair point too.
Some kids are inevitably going.
That is a fair point too. It really is. If you're parenting your kids, you know what they're reading. You don't need to go and ban the book for everyone, because, and this is something, again, that the right doesn't understand, parental rights for you mean parental rights for everyone else. If you want parental rights for you, then that means that leftist parents get to raise their kids doing whatever crazy leftist things they want to do. And you can't save everyone. You can't. Taking away the ability of leftist parents to do whatever leftist things they want to do with their future leftist kids is what will lead to your parental rights getting taken away. So just parent your kids and pay attention to what they're reading and have conversations with them and talk about things. I know this is a foreign concept to a lot of people. My parents sure as shit didn't do it, but, like, talk to your kids, develop relationships with your kids. I promise you, it's going to be so much more effective than book banning. Your mind is going to be blown.
Something up that maybe they're not ready for. But largely the experience that librarians share is that if a kid realizes something is beyond their comfort zone or they're going to put it down and pick something else, and usually they're going to find it too boring if it's too adult for them, so they're going to
That's another good point
else.
Right.
Right. So yeah.
So what role do you see, like, as a librarian and a board member for a library? Like, how are you affected by book challenges? Or how can you affect the outcome of those challenges?
So in my day job as an academic librarian in a medical library that's not even open to the public, largely this goes kind of under. The only way it impacts me in that position is that I make a point now to, if I was on the fence about a book for our collection and it's one that is being challenged, I look at it again and really try to make a case for buying it. Because we have that graphic medicine collection, but we also do have a humanities and medicine collection. And I tend to largely, March by the late John Lewis, I have that in our graphic medicine collection. It's about the civil rights movement. But my argument is that you can't really talk about healthcare in the U.S. without understanding the civil rights movement, because this stuff still impacts people's trust in medicine or lack of trust in medicine today.
You have to learn about socialist activism to talk about medicine.
In an academic library, this should be an opportunity to broaden and expand what we're collecting, because these stories and books being challenged obviously have some merit to them, and they're telling an important element or an important piece
not about medicine
truth about somebody's experience, or no one would be trying to challenge it or ban it in the first place, right?
Right.
So what you just heard is that the fact that people are trying to ban this book actually caused this guy to make a really convoluted case for why books about the civil rights movement need to be in a medical library. Now, like, I think there were things about the civil rights movement that were necessary, so I'm not gonna like I actually have no problem with that particular book, but does it belong in a medical library? Probably not. The reason that it's in the medical library, though, is because other people are making the argument that it should be banned. And so, like, I don't actually have a problem with this specific thing. I just want people to see how this works. You make books more enticing when you try to ban them, okay?
But in a board perspective, I mean, I think of my role as, making sure that we have a challenge policy and it's up to date, which we do, and it is. And then serving, if a challenge comes through and the staff needs support, like, that's what the board is there to do, is to say, no, our collection development policy allows for these titles. Because it makes sense as an example here, I won't go on my usual long rant about it. But Genderqueer is the most challenged book of 2021. It's a comic by Maya Kobabe. I'm pretty sure I mispronounce the name all the time. But it's about coming to terms with a non-binary identity, and it does have some depictions of sexual encounters in it. It's a comic, so it's very visual. But I mean, it's it's meant for older teens and adults, but it gets challenged all the time and banned outright all the time. But it's also the winner of like many book awards. And so most library collection development policies are set up to where we automatically buy these award-winning books. Because we know they're going to be popular, we know they're going to be read, and they've been vetted.
Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny? Awards are mostly controlled by leftists to hand out the awards to the best leftist activists doing the things that they like, right? I mean, sometimes like worthy things get awards too. I'm not saying all awards are shit, but can we just be honest that a lot of award shows are just self-congratulatory bullshit, like PR for leftists? So leftists give out the awards. The books that get the awards automatically go on the to purchase list for the libraries, where the socialist librarians will put them on displays Isn't that funny?
By awards committees, which often already have librarians on them. And so for books like that to be banned and challenged, it requires us to go against the policies we've already set. So as a board member, like thinking about it that way, we have to fight for that policy being there and why it's there, and try to explain to the people making the challenges why these books are there and important. Are we going to get through to people with logic? Probably not, but because it's a lot of these are emotionally driven and not driven by any. They're or emotionally and or values driven, and the values being driven by the challenges are not necessarily values the library should be caving to, is the way I want to say it. So I will.
For a person like me who like doesn't have a child in a public school system, I don't know, if there was like a book challenge in my community that I heard about, like what could I personally do? Like I felt so helpless, like reading about these like book challenges in like Tennessee and stuff, that I'm like, oh, that makes me so mad. But like, I don't know, like I feel like I can't do anything. Is there something I could do if it was in my local community?
I still can't believe that they pulled a mouse of like.
Yeah, like that was the one that really like started, I feel like the news cycle about it this year. Maybe not. Maybe there was more before that, but I feel like that was the one that was like really got a lot.
There were more before that, but that's the one. I think my reaction was why that one, like, because Mouse was like the first comic. It's a Pulitzer Prize winning comic about the Holocaust, which to pull it and say it's inappropriate is, you know, an interesting choice. But I think that's the reason that's part of why that one got so much press headline news about it compared to these other challenges, because in the US the idea of refusing to talk about the Holocaust is like unimaginable, whereas people have an easier time accepting unfortunately people have an easier time accepting challenges to, you know, queer literature. But so what can people, so the thing that we've been yelling and hoping people will do for a long time is to run for school and library boards. Without getting bogged down into the partisanness of it, right? That's part of how a lot of these changes on a local level keep happening, is one particular party and people with a set of values run for local boards and elections much more often than the other side's values do. And so like a volunteering or running to be on a school or a library board is a great way to stand up for these books. But you don't have to necessarily get involved that way to do it. So you can show up to, typically these kind of challenges and decisions for removal are going to be held in open meetings. So you can show up to these open meetings and voice your opinion. You can write to the people making the decisions. It's really kind of like political activism is what's needed here. But at a more local and grassroots kind of level than at, like, the national politics matter, but this is an example of where we've let local stuff slide for far too long when that should have been the greater focus kind of all along. I know you know this because of the work you do, but for people listening, like, you got to get, like, the local level is where you're going to be able to enact the most change here, which is where I want to end, but that doesn't work because, for example, in Kentucky, they just passed a bill allowing basically county judges to decide who's on library.
Thank you for the super chat. I'm sighing because I'm currently dealing with Rumble customer service, because Rumble mysteriously created a second channel for me and they have no explanation for how this happened. And apparently their customer service claims to speak English while not actually speaking English. And they don't understand what the problem is with them creating a mystery second channel for me. And they keep telling me to hide my main channel from the it's a whole fucking mess. That's why I was sighing. That's the point. Fuck you, Rumble. Rumble, worst streaming platform on the internet. The only reason I'm even on there is for people who like Rumble for reasons past my understanding. I'm not saying fuck you to the people on Rumble. I'm saying fuck you to the people who own Rumble and like to throw money at famous content creators while ignoring the fact that your platform fucking sucks. Sorry, had some feelings to get out there. Rottweiler. I wonder if they would be open-minded with books talking about the whole I can never pronounce that word, the starvation in Ukraine, Mao's 100 Flowers campaign, Cambodia's killing fields, etc. That's a really good question, Rottweiler. Perhaps people should make some like graphic novels about those things and see how it goes. Yeah, suck it, Rumble. I like truly and sincerely, it is the worst streaming platform on the internet for like 19 different reasons. And with the amount of money that Rumble is throwing around, they really should be able to have a better system. They really should be. It's not too much to ask. It is a pain in the ass every single time I stream on Rumble. And now the fact that there's this mystery second Rumble channel that Rumble created because there's a bug in Rumble's system that Rumble doesn't want to acknowledge, and Rumble's own customer service can't even help me fix this because they don't even understand what's going on and claim to speak English when I really actually doubt they really do speak English. I have a very hard time understanding this. And the fact that I know Rumble's system now better than Rumble's customer service knows their system, and no one thinks this is a problem, and Rumble is never going to fucking do anything about it. I hate Rumble so much. I cannot even, again, not the people on Rumble, but like, I hate it so much. I can't, like, this is why conservatives lose, because this is why conservatives will never build a secondary economy, because the companies that they build are like built on fucking toothpicks that have been pasted together, that they never go back and fix the fundamentals. They just throw hundreds of millions of dollars around to content creators to present an appearance of doing something right, but their infrastructure fucking sucks. All right, that's the last thing I'm going to say about it, I promise. I have a lot of feelings.
Boards and overrule the people who had been appointed before and elected before. So the state level matters too. So don't abandon the state and federal levels. But yeah, I mean, I guess if you petition and somehow elect county judges who are going to help fight challenges, that's the best move now. But I know how difficult that is in Kentucky.
Right. Like, you know, it's not like county judges run on a platform of like, I will be your library advocate, you know, like no one's thinking about that when they're electing a judge. That was such a bizarre law that just passed here.
I mean, I guess maybe you need some grassroots organizers to make that a ballot thing that people have to campaign on, right?
Right. So you've touched on this a little bit, but I know you have like a lot of thoughts on it. So I want to dive a little deeper, but what do you see as libraries' role in society? And okay, as a follow-up to that, do you think the pandemic has changed that at all?
So I think so the primary role of libraries in society that I view is really kind of twofold. So the library should be, one, a place where people can access information freely, and that doesn't necessarily just mean factual information. People have a right to entertainment and as well, in my view. So like fictional books fall into this category of access to a right to information, but they also serve as a community hub. It often goes around on social media, and it's disappointingly, frustratingly true that public libraries tend to be the only indoor place you're allowed to gather for free in the US. Everywhere else expects you to spend money. So there's a big role there as like a community hub and a place for people to gather and share ideas and learn together. And I don't think the pandemic has changed either of those roles, except maybe to expand what we mean by the physicality of the library.
Hang on. As soon as I stopped it, I started like choking on like my own spit or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, I know that was an image that everyone wanted. I understand. I do think that's something that that every single person can do with libraries. Why don't you start a dystopian book club at your local library? Why don't you get groups of people together and just start reading dystopian books like 1984 and Brave New World and Fahrenheit 451 and, you know, all those like great dystopian novels that are giving us a preview into the socialist insanity that is coming our way? Like, why don't conservatives do that? That's like a really subversive way to kind of like basically do something that the library should be in favor of, but do it to have conversations about like where things are going and what's showing up in the world and how it relates back to the dystopian books. I think that'd be a really great idea.
Because the library can be a digital space too.
Right.
There's been an explosion of digital programming from libraries by necessity. Some places were doing it already to a smaller degree, but now
exactly,
I'm
Rottweiler.
hoping that we don't fall backwards and
exactly.
do away with digital programming. We need to keep it in place as a, not just because we can reach new people that way, but because
yes, conservatives will never do this because they have jobs. Oh, this is why I love my community. Oh yeah, Animal Farm would definitely be dystopian. Oh yeah, 100%. There's a great illustrated version of Animal Farm. Like you can get it on Amazon. It's beautiful.
some of those new people could not physically make it into the library, and so it's kind of an access issue.
Right.
But so those are, so I think of the library in the public library as those two key things. My unfortunate part here is that the community space and community hub element is where we see a lot of that expansion I was talking about. As other social safety nets and social services and places kind of disappear because there's no funding or because they never existed in the US to begin with, the library ends up taking on all of those extra roles. You'll see a little bit in Lexington and Louisville probably, but in bigger cities on the coast, for example, people are constantly yelling about the library as a homeless shelter kind of. And we've taken on this role in a way because, again, we're the only place you can be for free. And we have heating and cooling. And so libraries tend to wind up being warming centers on frigid days. And that is not, I mean, and that's a good thing that some libraries are able to offer that. And if they have the staff and the staff feels comfortable doing it, but that should not necessarily be the library's responsibility. I got into a spat with somebody in Seattle about this last winter because the library did not open as a heating center or a warming center because their unionized staff did not feel safe coming into work because the weather was so bad. They were only able to say no because of that union. That's the reason I mention it. Few libriaries are unionized. It's rare. But so this launched a whole conversation where like the city of Seattle should be providing warming centers as part of a safety net rather than relying on the library to provide it. Right.
Right.
I don't know. So, not to make it depressing at the end of my thing, because libraries should provide all these things.
No, yeah.
It's just I'm questioning whether that's our purpose. Should providing information and community space should be enough. That should be, those are big goals on their own, and plenty for libraries to do as a cornerstone of society. We can do those jobs better if we have other services that can take on some of the burden, is kind of what I'm really saying.
Right. And so you mentioned the e-space of libraries. And I wanted to mention that too. I know like ebooks and audiobooks were already gaining a ton of popularity, but it seems like really blew up during COVID-19 lockdowns and everything. So how has that affected libraries?
Yeah. I mean, so it's, ebooks loaning, I can use Worcester Public as an example and Harvard Medical Library as an example. Our ebook loaning has like doubled. At Worcester Public, it's closer to like quadrupled at this point. But at Countway, it's doubled. And it's changed the way that we are purchasing going forward. There had already been a big shift to spending, especially in an academic library, buying much more electronically than physically. Academic libraries are suffering from a lack of space as universities take more and more space away from the library for other things. So ebooks have become more common. But it comes at there's a cost to that too. For libraries, ebooks are astronomically more expensive than physical books.
Interesting.
So like for you and I, most of the time an ebook is probably actually cheaper than a physical book. especially if you're buying from the evil empire that is Amazon. That's what my circle refers to them as. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that checks out.
But so largely you can get e-audio books cheaper than physical books. But for the library, we charge. So for medical textbooks, I often spend 3 to 12 times as much on a single seat for an ebook compared to a physical book.
Oh my gosh. Why is it like that?
I mean, the publisher sets the fees, right? But their argument is that in theory, a physical book will break down and wear out. So we'll buy another one. An ebook is never going to break down or wear out. So once we've bought it, right? But so public libraries get hit differently, but just as hard because so you've got platforms like Hoopla and Overdrive. Those are the big two that people are probably using at your local public library. Libby might be what you're thinking of for as an app. And so typically public libraries they lease ebooks. So you buy it for either X amount of time or X number of checkouts. And then once you've reached that limit, you either buy another license or it goes away. So public libraries are never really, not never, but are seldom actually buying a digital copy of something. It's based on a usage or a length of term lease kind of model.
That's so shady. I hate
and they
that.
still cost, and despite that, they still cost more than physical books do.
So is it like bad?
No. Yeah. So
like, should I only check out physical books from the library? Like, what's my plan of action?
So here? You as a library patron should feel free to read however you want, right? This is not a problem for you as an individual reader to try to deal with, unless you want to help the library campaign for better terms. Which there has been some attempts legally to make that possible. So in the US, there's this right of first sale kind of thing where libraries have to be given fair access to the print book marketplace. And we have a right to lend physical books. Those rights get less defined and clear with digital copies of things, though. Because US copyright law has never properly dealt with digital created things. We saw that. I mean, you and I are of the age of Napster and LimeWire and all of these things. And
fuck, LimeWire.
We saw the music industry sort of kind of deal with this,
That's
but not
a
really
throwback.
actually deal with it. But the same issue is happening in books too. And I mean, on an individual level, Amazon reached into people's Kindles and deleted books before. So you kind of technically are only leasing those two. It's just an individual lease instead of a library one. But so really that's so you as a reader should borrow however you want to and serves you best from the library. And anyone listening should do that as well. But if you want to try to help libraries out, you can try to push for better copyright law. And to try to push for any sort of legal way for publishers to have to set fair terms for library ebook purchasing. I mean, Maryland tried to do this through the courts, and it basically got slapped down for the moment because current copyright law is what it is. But we're hoping that there's some way to change this. Other states are trying.
All right. This doesn't really seem... It sounds like they already got past the book banning stuff, which is really what I wanted to listen to anyway. Now they're just like talking shop about libraries, which might be interesting. But since we've already spent an hour and a half on this, I think I've got enough. I think I'm done. Also, because I have a webinar that I'm doing later. So I'm sorry if anyone else really wanted to keep going. I do think there was some interesting stuff there, some interesting perspective, but I think we got from that what we can. And I want to remind everyone that in a little less than an hour and a half, 90 minutes from now, I will be starting my free webinar, Learn How to Speak Socialist. This is completely free to sign up for. I do hope I'll see you guys there. I just need to take a little break between streaming and doing the webinar because I do want it to be a great webinar. We're going to be watching a lot of clips. This is not just going to be me talking the whole time, but what I want to do is I want to break down the basics that you don't really get a chance to learn when you're jumping right into a Socialism Saturday. I want to bring you up to speed on what the far left actually thinks, not a right-wing interpretation of what the far left thinks, what the far left actually thinks, because those are two very different things. So there's still more than enough room. I think there's still like 100 spaces left in the webinar. So a lot of people are coming. Like, I was really just thrilled at the registration numbers. So thank you everyone who has signed up for it. I will be pinging people on social media to just get any last minute signups. And we're going to learn how to speak socialist at 8 p.m. Eastern tonight. If you cannot make it to the live show, then sign up anyway. And what's going to happen is you will get an on-demand video delivered to your inbox following the main presentation. All right, guys, that's all we have for today. I'm going to go get ready for the webinar. I will see everyone back here tomorrow at 5 p.m. where we'll do it all again. Take care, guys. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon. Bye.